Welcome to episode 1 of the Debate Dudes podcast with Sean and James. Before we start, quick disclaimer. We know nothing about what we're talking about. We are both idiots, and nothing we say will be true. With that said, let's get into our first topic. Does the present exist? I, Sean, believe the present does exist.
The present doesn't exist, Sean.
And James disagrees. I'll let you take the first argument because I feel like most people
You have the burden of proof, Sean.
Most people agree the present exists. So present some evidence that it doesn't.
Okay. Basically, any amount of time that you have can always be cut in half. For example, a second can be cut in half into half of a second, and so forth. So any time that the present would have to exist, the second it exists, it's already in the past. Like, any amount of time that it can exist for, as soon as it's created, it's already in the past. Like, it's like having a line that's moving across a number line, and that's time flowing, right? But the line has, like, zero width, because if it had any width, then the past couldn't exist.
James, the present isn't an amount of time. It's not an area in time that you can describe. It's a line, as you said, that moves across a timeline. It doesn't have any width to it because that's not what it is. It's a point on a line. It's not a array on a line. So it doesn't have to have width to it to exist. The present is, we don't experience the present, of course. We experience the past because by the time our brain has processed the information we take in, it's already been fractions of seconds, but its time is still passed, and we're relatively slow. But the present does exist. It is a line that goes through time from, and there's past before it and future after.
I'll give you the fact that it goes through time, but it doesn't have any time within itself. Like, the present doesn't exist for any specified amount of time at all. It's just a point that you can plot on a line that says, this is now, in quotation marks.
Yeah.
Like, but that's not, no, like, living organism could ever experience that.
No, we all experience,
Not really.
Okay, we experience what was the present, like, a few moments ago. So, we'll never experience the present as it happens, of course. But we do live in the present.
No, we live in the past.
We live in the present.
We live in the past because everything that happens in the present moves through time, and by the time, like, light, for example, like, I'm staring at a light right now. I'm not looking at the light as it is. I'm looking at the light however many milliseconds it is away from me. Just like when you look at the sun, it's, what is that, 8 minutes or whatever it takes for the light to reach us? So we always live in the past.
That's not true. We exist in the present.
Yeah. But we perceive it as...
Yes. We perceive the past, but we live in the present.
It's an interesting topic.
But you're wrong so far. So far we have established, you have not proven me wrong that the present does exist. And I've also stated that we live in the present.
How about this? Let me try and change what I'm saying. I'll give you that the present exists, but we can't live in it in the sense that we can perceive it while it's happening. Do you agree with that?
Well, of course. We don't have the sensory ability, and I don't think any device we could create would have the sensory ability to experience the present as it happens.
I would agree. I mean, like, what would you even try and make that would...
Well, actually, it depends on how you think of it, because things in the present are happening, correct?
Yeah. That's a little, like...
Well, okay, just hear me out.
They've happened already.
They are also happening. Well,
can't say they're happening because
listen. Let's say
that.
two chemicals when put together perform a chemical reaction, become something else. You put two of these atoms of these chemicals together, and they would form a chemical reaction to be something else. Would that? I know it doesn't like sense it, but does that change accurately happen in the present? What I'm trying to say is, those things, the reaction happens in the present, and it is sensed in the present.
Hold up, stop. Even that's not entirely true, because some reactions take time for them to react.
Yes,
and by the time it starts, like, it's already in the past.
Not necessarily.
Yes, necessarily.
You said some reactions take time to happen.
I am
okay,
pretty confident that there are no chemical reactions that happen instantaneously.
Well, maybe
even light.
Okay, James, the mechanisms behind the reactions, at some point it has to happen instantaneously. Correct?
No, it just has to happen at a certain point, not instantaneously.
Well, yeah. So there's a point in time when it hasn't changed, and a point in time when it has changed. So at one point in the present, it shows an accurate representation of the present.
So you're saying this. You're saying if you were to put it on a line again, right? Mm-hmm. And you have before it happening at one end of the line and after it happened at the other end of the line. You're saying that there's a certain point in which it happens, which is in between those 2 points, right?
No. What I'm saying is, think of a number line, and there's a point in the number line where the reaction, some, like, mechanism behind a mechanism of a reaction has happened. That point is experienced in the present for that thing.
Yeah, I think we're talking about a paradox now, like...
How so?
You know the Achilles paradox?
You just really wanted to talk about this. I know you really want to talk about this. Go ahead, explain your Achilles paradox.
Okay, so it's like he's running to a race. We've talked about this with Mr. Ickes before. Anyways, he's running a race, and every time he gets halfway, like he has to run halfway to the finish line, and then now he has half the race left. He has to run halfway between that, 75% of the race done, and then he keeps going, right? And then by that logic, he'll never reach the end because any amount of distance can always be cut in half, theoretically. I mean, not at the atomic level, obviously, but like just with standard distance, he can always go half of what he just did, right? So the paradox is that obviously you can run across the finish line, and you also traveled half the distance every time. So I think that's kind of like how the present works. Like, it happens at a certain point, right? But it's kind of hard to, like, measure when it happens, because as soon as it does happen, it's in the past.
I don't really like...
And that's why I'm saying that, like, what's the word I'm looking for? Like, realistically, the present doesn't exist.
I don't really like the Achilles paradox. It doesn't make very much sense to me.
Makes sense.
So let me explain. Achilles, in this theoretical example, runs half of the distance of the race every second, right? That's what it was? So by that logic, he would never reach the finish line, because he would always just go increasingly smaller amounts.
Well, you've actually brought up something that is slightly different, because...
Well, we can talk about this.
So you're saying every time he goes half of what he did every second.
That's what the paradox is.
So I think...
Well, that's the example given in the paradox. But what I'm saying is, that isn't an accurate representation of what you're trying to say, because he'll never reach the finish line. Because you can't... A person can't run half every single time. That's not how people work. Like...
Okay, well then don't think of it literally. Think of it as, like... Yeah. Theoretically.
Like, if you think of it, like, mathematically on a graph, he'll never reach the 0 point on the graph if he's counting down. Like...
But
it'll always just get cut in half.
It'll get infinitely close.
Yeah, but time doesn't flow.
So this is what I'm applying to your thing about how the present is a point on a line, right?
Yeah.
You can get infinitely close to it, but you can't exactly. But you see, like, the present. That's why I'm saying the present doesn't realistically exist.
Yeah, it does.
No, it theoretically exists, but since no one can really perceive it occurring, like, okay, when someone thinks of the present, they think of what's happening now, like in, I don't know, just like within a few seconds of itself, or depending on your definition of the present, like maybe a couple minutes, right? But the truth is, as soon as something that has, like, as soon as an event occurs that has an amount of time associated with it, it's already in the past, regardless of how short it occurs. Because even if it occurs for 0.00001 seconds or whatever, it is in the past as soon as it happens. Meaning that the only way something can be in the present is if it occurs for 0.000 infinite zeros and then that last one,
Well-
which can't happen.
James, events don't like have time periods that like
Every event has a time
no.
associated with it.
Thanks for interrupting me in the middle of what I was saying. No, how events work, like there's a part of the event that is in the present. Of course, you can't perform the entire event in the present, with the exception, is what I was proposing before, of the mechanisms of reactions. Like, at some point, when you, like, how do chemical reactions work, how do the things that make the chemical reactions work, if you go down far enough, you'll find something that happens instantaneously, and that happens in the present.
I don't believe that's entirely
Yes, and
accurate.
then while those things happen in the present, when added together, they affect the mechanisms, and all added up, it has events. But those mechanisms are happening in the present, and that is the present. As time flows, you're going through all the mechanisms, and that's affecting what becomes the present.
Okay, but think about it this way now. You said a mechanism that makes another mechanism happen and so forth, right? That's the reaction, okay? So does each mechanism have an amount of time that it takes to do the next one?
Well, like, yeah.
Yeah, right? So that means, so like one of them has a time that it takes to complete, and then the next one that's caused because of that has a time that it takes to complete. And even if it has a time that takes to complete, it can't be in the present. Because any amount of time that's past the original starting time is in the past already.
Well, yeah, but it was still in the present when it happened.
But not really, because as soon as it happens, like literally instantaneously with no time, as soon as it happens.
A small amount of time passes, even if it's a fraction of a fraction of a fraction of a fraction of a second. Time passes after the event, and then it's no longer in the present. But it was in the present a fraction of a fraction of a fraction of a fraction of a second ago.
I don't know if that's entirely true. If that does work, then it's still realistically not in the present.
How?
Because no, like,
If that does work, if what
no,
you're
no, no,
saying...
listen. It's still theoretically in the present, okay? Because first of all, even if it is in the actual present, if anything like a machine, for example, or a living creature tries to like interact with this reaction or like is affected by this reaction, it's going to be perceived in the present for them, but it's really in the past. Like when you, I don't know, blink your eyes, right? You think it's happening like right now, but the truth is it's like by the time you've realized you've done it, it's already in the past. It's same with this like reaction, right? As soon as it happens, it's already in the past.
Not as soon as it happens. Right after it happened, it's in the past.
But you
Like-
can't say right after it happened because there's no amount of time that's right after it that can't be cut in half.
I suppose so, but that doesn't mean the present doesn't exist. Like,
So what do you mean when you say right after it? Like, you can't say what happens right after it, because something that happens right after, like, okay, let's say
As soon
one,
as- okay.
1 second after it, right? Okay, that's considered after it. Well, you can have half a second. Well, you can have a fourth of a second. Well, you can have an eighth of a second. It just keeps going infinitely, which is why I'm saying the present can't exist, because as soon as it happens, even this, like, as it happens, like right on zero, it's in the past already.
I do see what you're saying now. Like, even it's infinitely thin. Like the line, it's a point. It doesn't have width to it.
That's why I'm saying that's why I'm saying
Yeah.
it's like it theoretically exists, but like it's also impractical to say the present anyways. Like nothing in the world operates in the present. Everything's
Everything
in
in
the past
the world.
already.
operates in the present. We exist.
Sorry, I misspoke.
We
It-
exist,
it
we
does
exist
happen in the present.
exclusively in the present.
It does happen.
We don't
I
exist in the-
misspoke. Hold up. I messed up. Everything happens in the present, but everything is perceived in the past.
Yeah.
Is what I'm saying. So like everything's perceived in the past, which means it's almost pointless to even try and examine the present anyways. It's not like we could build a device where we could live in the present.
We do live in the present.
But we don't perceive it as the present. It's already the past by the time we can comprehend what's happened. It's
Yeah.
in the past before we can even comprehend it
but
happened.
everything in the world exists in the present. So
Yeah,
how can you
but
say it doesn't exist?
It exists. It exists theoretically.
No, it exists. In reality.
Once again, we have to go back to this time, right? As soon as
Is it, James? Is it possible to exist in the past? No. Is it possible to exist in the future? No. Everything exists in the
That's
present.
a fair point. Yeah. But as far as operating with things or being a part of something, everything is in the past for that. What isn't in the past?
Nothing's in the past.
No, but what isn't perceived as in the past?
What isn't? Yeah, I see what you mean. Yeah, we can't perceive anything not in the past. Yes, I agree with that. So, what conclusions have we come to today?
Okay.
So-
Alright, I may have. I'm gonna alter my original thing. I still don't know for certain if the present actually exists, because for something to exist, it has to be created, and then it has to still be around for some time after it's created. So when an event happens, there has to be an amount of time afterwards where it's still there, and obviously we've already concluded that with the present, the amount of there's no amount of time that occurs after it that isn't in the past already. So
Yeah. So, in short, what is your current view of the present? Does it exist? Does it
I'll
not?
agree with you when you say that where everything operates in the present, obviously it has to, because nothing can have already happened before it happened.
Yeah.
And nothing can have happened already before it happened. So, okay, everything operates in the present, at least in our universe. But it's unrealistic to call it the present, because by the time, literally
You're
as
trying
soon
to
as
justify
it
your
happens,
point of view, but I'm saying the present exists, everything exists in the present, and
nothing's perceived in the present, though.
yes, nothing is perceived in the present. I'll give you that. And I think that's it. Any further words?
It's just you make it sound like both. Okay, so the past has a growing amount of time that as time flows, and while that happens, the past continually gains more time that has been in the past, and the future obviously. Well, that's a weird one to think
Does the
about.
future
too.
decrease?
Yeah. Whoa.
Is there an end to time?
That we should talk about that some other time.
We'll talk about that sometime in the
Yeah.
future.
Okay.
Maybe we'll do some kind of
Maybe we won't.
future
Maybe
time.
the future won't exist, John.
Maybe the time will have already ended.
This is a tricky definition, because I guess I hadn't thought about this as closely as I should have before we started, but I don't really know. It's hard to it's not a
It's complicated. Yeah.
okay.
Well, I think that will bring our first episode to conclusion. We'll leave the audience to decide who was correct. Don't you think so?
Yeah, you
All
guys
right.
can decide.
See you next time, everyone. Sean signing out.
Adios.